I started literally from a near zero position and reached to this point. I perhaps did something well, considering the fact that I never studied um, in top level schools. At that point, I had already written 2 articles in 2 publications, local publications. And I immediately said, I write. That I write differentiated me from the rest of the crowd. I couldn't speak English at that time, believe me. I was the only one who would not speak English in the class because they were all product managers from multinational companies. I wanted people to love me. Bottom line is, I think I achieved that. Maybe a small group. I'm not looking at I'm not a mega influencer. A brand is the way people know you. If they know me as a coach, you as a blogger, that's your brand. Your profession comes underneath your brand. 90% newcomers fail miserably in Canada. So if I could help them in their job search journey, it could be an interesting thing to do. You're not showing off. It's a very sensitive word for many people. But if you don't show off, nobody would know.
Hello friends. In this podcast, my guest is Mr. Hammad Siddiqui, an inspiring individual. I've been following him for quite some time, and he was gracious enough to give me his time in order for us to record this podcast. He's a LinkedIn and career coach based out of Canada. He's the founder of LinkedInimpact.com and careerguru.co. Now, his claim to fame is that he is one of the most followed career coach on LinkedIn in Canada, and he appears within the top 100 career coaches across the globe on Google. He has inspired and coached many young and mid-career professionals and has completely changed their lives by expanding on their potential in order for them to achieve their goals and be successful in life. And this is exactly why I'm inspired of him. I follow him and even consider him my teacher in the area of becoming a career coach. So in this podcast, Hammad shares his personal life journey, his career pivots, including the pivot that he made in his late 50s, becoming a solopreneur. How do you find your USP, growth mindset? How do you go about crafting your goals, the importance of your personal brand, and how to build a personal brand? Now, there was so much more that we wanted to cover. However, we had limited time, which is 1 hour. So I decided with Hammad that we will make it as podcast 1, and we'll have follow-up sessions in which we will cover things like how do you work on your career, how do you grow in your career, how do you get a job, how do you make use of LinkedIn to network and find a job, and many other coaching tips coming directly from Hammad himself. And hence, I will be recording another podcast session with Hammad where we will be covering all these areas. Now, before going into the podcast, I have 2 requests for you. 1, press the like button so I stay motivated in developing similar content. 2nd, press the subscribe button so you get notified as soon as I put a new content on this channel. Now, on this channel, I post content twice a week pertaining to personal finance and career success for early and mid-career professionals. Now, without further ado, let's get rolling into the podcast. Hello friends, today my guest is Mr. Hammad Siddiqui. So, as you know, I post a lot on my YouTube channel. I make videos around career, interview, success, how to get a job, how to land a job, which also makes me post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. And while I was growing my personal brand and posting all this stuff on LinkedIn, I also started to see, because I was becoming more active on LinkedIn, I also started to see this individual, Mr. Hammad Siddiqui, pop more and more in my feed. And I kind of became intrigued because he would be talking similar stuff on the similar topic. Rather, he's very much focused on LinkedIn, which is an amazing tool, and we'll talk about that as well. So I became more and more intrigued, and I started to follow this individual, and I was really impressed by the content he was posting, the kind of coaching he does. And I was like, this is kind of the model that I want to learn from and I want to follow and all. So he's kind of my teacher before he even knew he was my teacher. And then I was doing this podcast with another friend of mine from Canada, where we were talking about Canadian immigration and all. And he introduced me to Mr. Hammad Siddiqui, and I was so lucky to be introduced to him. This guy has an amazing story to tell about his life, about his journey, about his move to Canada, his career, and where he is now today. So anyways, I'll stop talking here and I'll pass on to Mr. Hammad to talk about his journey. So Hammad, if you can just start with your introduction first. I give introduction, but the introduction I gave was more as to how much I know you. But it would be nice if you can speak for yourself as to your introduction, your journey, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Barrows, first of all, finding me. I mean, because LinkedIn should get all the credit for that. And then initiating this discussion, it's amazing. And I've been following you as well. You're doing some fascinating work. So I grew up in Karachi. I never was a good student throughout my life. In fact, I'm the eldest in the family, and late father was always worried. White collar family, what happens? The elder son takes most of the responsibility. And he was always worried, this guy does not study well. I was like more into cricket and hanging out with friends and cycling. So I would like do 3 hours, 4 hours of cycling just for fun in summer afternoon in Karachi. So that's kind of a very humble beginning that I had. I think earlier in my age, I somehow figured out that I am not a science person. I never liked mathematics in my life. I can't remember numbers, and I was more interested in working with people. So that was like, when I was literally at that point in time, there was no internet, the exposure was very limited, but somehow I figured it out. So I'm talking about 1982. My father wanted me to become an engineer, and I did pre-engineering, by the way, from Shiponas College in Karachi, but I did it miserably, so I couldn't get anywhere. I switched from engineering to BCom, did well in BCom, and fell in love with economics, because economics was something you could actually see doing for us. Inflation, you can actually figure out what inflation means. You could actually figure out what circular economy means. I could actually figure out. It was more like a people subject. And then I started my working life immediately after BCom. Started again very humbly in 1990. I got the opportunity to work with or to start my first professional, I would say, quote unquote professional job with British Deputy High Commission in Karachi as trade promotion assistant. And there's no stopping since. So I became their head of trade investment in Pakistan in 5 years. Continued that job, which was the senior most position a locally engaged person could get, until 2006. And I was then poached by a US economic think tank to start as a project manager for Pakistan. And then gradually things started happening. I started doing things in the region, and eventually I became the country director and the regional director. So I actually, my last job with this economic think tank, Center for International Private Enterprise, was as regional director, which I think, again, for a locally engaged staff, it's the senior most position one could get. So that's kind of a little career background that I had, and I can go on and on for hours on what I did. But I wrote some books. I thought, what is different between me and sort of other people in the same category, like senior level C-suite category, at least in Pakistan. So I realized that people don't write books, and I was bad as well. I mean, for God's sake, I was writing my first book. But I wrote my first book 12, 13 years ago, and that was on career development, because that was the passion that I had. I started literally from a near zero position and reached to this point. I perhaps did something well, considering the fact that I never studied in top level schools. So I was probably doing something which actually worked for me. So I actually wanted to capture all that into that book. And that was kind of a completely kind of transformed my brand. At that point in time, 12, 13 years ago, how many people of our sort, I mean, you're much younger, mashallah, of our sort would have thought of creating their own blog and host it onto their own website? I bought my first domain, careerguru.co. Like, look at the domain, careerguru.co, about 13, 14 years ago. And I actually appreciate at that point in time was a young fellow, and I follow him, Usman Latif. And he would follow me, and we met in Lahore, and he said, sir, I think you should buy a domain. You should host your blog. I said, who cares? You said, do it. So he found me this career guru, and com was not available, so I took co. But now think about it, 13 years down the line, you can't find even careerguru.co. So taking an early decision in your life always helps. This is what I did. I kept experimenting and kept growing.
So thank you. And there are so many questions I already have, but let's stick to the one that you're talking now, which is around the book. I assume you said you had a 9 to 5 job and a good job, a good career already going. Then why write a book? And the reason I know the answer to to why you should write a book, but given when you're in the 9 to 5 and you're in the rat race, what made you step out and say, okay, I would do something different? So what was the thought process?
Yeah. So, in my job, I would meet like top CEOs in Pakistan, like all these British companies, Munawar Hamid of that time, or all those Tariq Ram. You probably know a few of them. I would meet them as part of my British career, like British Crypto Commission career. And very inspirational, very experienced people. But their experience and their knowledge will die with them. They will be gone. Once they're gone, nobody will remember them. Whether they had an OBE or they had Sitare Imtiaz or whatever, nobody would remember them. So what legacy they're leaving behind? I just didn't want to be in that rate. So I just wanted to be different. And one of the things that really helped me, like in my first job, proper job at British Deputy High Commission, was my written piece. So what had happened was that I applied for the job, long story short, I applied for the job. There were another 120, 110 people in the queue. I was invited. They shortlisted about 10. I was invited. I did my first interview very well. I was preparing for economics, so I remember all those, figures at that point in time, GDP, stuff like that. I literally cleanballed the guy who was interviewing me, because in your normal life you don't remember those numbers. Right? You don't need to. So, anyways, I went for the final interview, which was the head of trade at that time, commercial section, but trade and investment, and deputy head of the mission. His name was Mike Hewitt, long, tall golfer, amazing guy. And so he was interviewing me, and he was just discussing things. I thought they had already kind of in their mind that they would probably prefer me over other candidates. That's I could feel. Last point, he said, what do you do in your free time? And at that point, I had already written 2 articles in 2 publications, local publications. And I immediately said, I write. That I write differentiated me from the rest of the crowd. And he said, what do you write? And I had that magazine with me. I took it out, put it in front of him. This is my recent article. I only wrote 2, but that was the story that I had to tell him. He said, this is my recent article. And he said, he got excited. He opened up the magazine. He said, this. And by the way, that magazine was owned by Javed Iqbal, JI. I don't know how many people know JI. JI has been a good friend, CMC at that point in time, and PR for Pepsi and Benazir and all that. So he said, oh, this is JI's magazine. Yes. So he read, can I keep it? Yes. And that magazine was kept in my personal file. When I left British FPI Commission, that magazine was still in my personal file. So that was the trigger. If I write, I'll be different from other people. And that was at that time when things were not, that YouTube was not there and stuff. So when I reached at that point where I was kind of recognized, everybody knew in Pakistan, people would invite me at conferences and all that. I said, there's so many people who come to conferences. There are so many people who speak. What is different between me and them? I said, I need to write a book. If I write a book, I'll be different from them. I'll brand myself as an author. And that will be my elevator pitch. At that point, my elevator pitch was that magazine, and now my elevator pitch at that point was my book. So that's how I kind of started it and completed it in less than a year.
That is amazing. I have two thoughts here. One is, I think Steve Jobs said it once that we want to be not better than competition. We don't want to be better, we want to be different. And this is what I took from starting my YouTube as well. Because when I was starting my YouTube channel and my blogging and vlogging, I always thought, what is different that I would say? Because everything that has to be said has already been said.
Yeah.
It's not like you will create something new. So I was like, I won't be saying something new, but I can say it in a different way. And my way cannot be copied by any other person. So I decided that I just need to be different versus being the best. So I don't try to be best anymore. I just try to be different. And you talked about that book was the idea for you to be different, just stand out. And second thing is, I think it's Scott Adams. He's the Dilbert cartoonist. He said in his book where he talks, I think it's an autobiography kind of a book. I'm not sure what the book is, but he's mentioned or he's talked about skill stacking, where he says, for instance, I am, let's say me, Behroz, I am the finance manager. So I know finance, but there are so many other people who know finance. But then I know e-commerce and finance. Now there are less people who know e-commerce and finance. So the percentage from 100 becomes, let's say 50. And then I also know how to do YouTube, let's say. So now 50 becomes 25. And I've also written a book and this and this. Now you start to become unique. And once you stack like 5-6 skills, you become a very unique individual who doesn't exist, or that skill stack doesn't exist anymore or any other place. And suddenly you are a unique individual who's very much in demand because you have those skills. I can write, I'm a finance guy, I can e-commerce and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so again, our USP is everything, so I haven't read Flip Kotler, and I mean, read them, but of course, I didn't do my MBA, but I read whenever I have an opportunity. So USP is everything. In my life, when I was very young, in fact, before British FTI Commission, I worked with the builders called Sasi Group, and I was the most troublemaker actually in that group. I was a salesperson. Real estate sales is not easy, or never was easy. But okay, right? They wanted to show that they're progressive, right? So they sent two of us, our senior manager, he passed away, a fantastic fellow, and me. I was very young, and they sent us for a course, product management course, at PIM, Pakistan Institute of Management. I couldn't speak English at that time, believe me. I was the only one who would not speak English in the class, because they were all product managers from multinational companies, some amazing fellows and ladies. My choice was what? Either I just keep my mouth shut and don't learn anything, or don't ask, because asking actually triggers learning, or I speak Urdu. So I spoke Urdu. And I was the only one who would speak Urdu. So why speak English in a class which is all Urdu speaking? Everybody was like, look. Anyways, Amjad Humayi was the name of the gentleman who taught us, who was an MBA, who taught in the US, came back, and he was serving as general manager at that time, Holiday Inn, Karachi, and he was kind of taking this additional responsibility. So I learned product management, 4 Ps at that point in time. So it was like a 5-day program. On the 5th day, every group had to make a presentation, and every group had to pick a topic or a product, and make a presentation on how would you use 4 Ps in your product. And on the 4th day, they would ask you around lunchtime, what product do you want? So I said I would sell real estate. And Amjad Saab said, Hammad, it's a very difficult topic. I said, so what? I don't want to sell a soap, because ultimately I'm going to sell real estate. So I need to understand whether these 4 Ps are applicable on real estate market or not. He said, yeah, go ahead, let's try. And so he put me at the last in the presentation. There were 4, I think, presentations before me. I was the last. Maybe two things. He thought that he's going to bore everyone because he's going to present in Urdu. He's the youngest and he's the least educated in the group because they were all MBAs and stuff. I made the last presentation. I made the longest presentation because there were so many questions. Not because my presentation was long, but it was questions. Because in my presentation, I raised those points which other people could not think of because they were not selling real estate. They were all selling FMCG products. So you can easily differentiate yourself, as you rightly said. But I got these 4Ps and I said, okay. Then I started thinking, if a product, you can develop a USP and you can market a product, a soap or a detergent or a cigarette or whatever, a car, using this simple principle. If you apply this simple principle on your own life, will you not be different from other people? So I actually started implementing those 4Ps onto my own life. Very simple. Product, promotion, price, and distribution.
Beautiful. Now, you did mention that the reason when you started writing the book, you were going to some conferences where you were a speaker already. This was not part of your 9 to 5 job. No.
Well, yes and no. Because, at senior positions, if you're invited, you bring in some, branding to your organization as well. So,
yeah.
I mean, I never took it that way. If I'm invited at midday for a conference, I would just go. Nobody would stop me, whether you call it. By the way, it never was a 9 to 5 job. My first batch at the British Consulate was 8 to 3 and Friday half day. So it was like British standard. And when I kind of started my side career, it was usually longer than expected because I had to read a lot and that was all part of it. So if I'm reading something, if I've got to read, if I have to do something on corporate governance and I need to really understand what does it mean, how many people know succession planning, right? I know it because I've read about it, I've done the certification. So it never was a 9 to 5 from 2006 onward for me. It was always at least 60 to 70 hours in a week because I would put in all my reading time in it. It was part of my job that I need to read. And at times I had nothing to do. That was the beauty. I was talking to somebody yesterday also while we were walking. I said, I actually, every time from British Consulate to site, there were days or sometime a week that when I had nothing to do because I had team, I trusted my team, I empowered them and they would do it. They would only tell me if they have to come to me, they will just come to me because I had open doors. Anyways, going back to the point, USP is really important. If you understand the USP, and everyone has skills, we don't appreciate what skills we have. And if we could actually be different from everyone else.
Okay, cool, makes sense. Now, the reason I was asking about and referring to the 9 to 5, I wanted to understand when did you pivot from your day job into personal branding? And that's why I was asking, when did you started doing your conferences where you would go just as you, Hammad Siddiqui, and not for the organization? So what was that point where you started to work on your, call it, side hustle, personal brand, and what was the thought process and how did you move into it?
So frankly speaking, Bharat, it was not a side hustle because, when I was working in my corporate career, I never thought that I would ever need a side hustle. I never thought that I would actually start my own business per se because I never needed to. So that was not the ambition. Let's put it this way. The ambition was that I had something to share with me, and people would appreciate that, and they would invite me to come and speak on small focus group meetings, on roundtables, on conferences, to at times participate, at times just be there as a learner, and I'm a believer that learning must never stop. So I would go, and that actually gave me a lot of visibility. I became so visible Um, like I was young, of course. Now I'm 58. I was very young, so a young fellow who dresses up well and who speaks decent enough. Um, like communication skill was quite good. Um, so I could relate to people. I would imagine. So my thinking was that if on the on that panel, if we have got topmost people sitting, and Hammad Siddiqui is not probably at that level. If Asad Umar is sitting at that point, Angro CEO, people would go to Asad Umar, during the coffee break. But think about it. Hammad Siddiqui, not many people know, number one. If they know Hammad Siddiqui, they would still like to go and listen to Asad Umar. But the flip side of the coin is that Asad Umar has no time for anyone. I have time for everyone. So anyone who would connect with me is still connected with me. Those 27,000 people on LinkedIn are not all from Pakistan though, but whatever 3,000 people, 5,000 people I have, that's the cream. They are the people who kind of started following me 15 years ago. They still follow me. The people who still send me a message and seek some advice if they have to. How many people reach out to Asad Umar? So that's the difference that I wanted to create. I wanted people to love me. Bottom line is, I think I achieved that. Maybe a small group. I'm not looking at I'm not a mega influencer, but even if I'm influencing 50 people or 100 people, I'm happy. I'm actually helping someone do something right.
Cool, makes sense. So when was the time when you started actively working on your personal brand, and how was that process?
I think started with the book. So I would say 12, 13 years ago, I did not, as I said earlier, Barrows, I did not know that I would actually ever leave my corporate career. But the book was the differentiating point in my life. Okay, that's for the brand, because then people started knowing me as career guru. That's when I started my blog. I started writing, and that's an interesting story as well. I started that blog with the thinking, okay, I'm going to share entrepreneurial stories on my blog, and I shared few interesting stories, entrepreneurs that are not highlighted otherwise, because I knew so many, and I would just go and talk to them. Sometimes if they're not in the same location, I would just send them a questionnaire, get feedback, create a blog, and I would post. But what made me realize that entrepreneurship is at least at that point was a nascent stage. Like people were talking about it 12, 13 years ago, but not many people knew how to start an entrepreneurial career. They were more interested in searching for jobs, job search. So I switched that blog and I started writing about job search strategies, what you should be doing, stuff. And I wrote a lot actually. Then I stopped, of course, because when I joined Center for International Private Enterprise, that job was very demanding. Like at least initial 10 years were very demanding. But point is that I think we all should work on our personal branding every day. That's my learning. Every day. Every time you post something on LinkedIn, a video that goes out on your YouTube, you're actually working a step, you're actually moving a step ahead in your branding. At least one new person would know you. One new person would know you. You probably have in a week 1 or 2 new connections. That's how you start kind of your journey towards your personal brand. So I started 12, 13 years ago. I'm still working on it and still building it up.
So, question, why work on your personal brand? Look, let's say I want to be a social media influencer, I want to be a YouTuber, a LinkedIn coach. Yeah, makes sense. I should work on my personal brand. But I have a stable job, I like my career, I like what I do. 9 to 5 is good for me. I think I don't have the entrepreneurial skills. Should I still work on my personal brand? And if yes, why?
Okay, so for me, I'm a big fan of simplifying complex concepts. Okay, so let's simplify it. What is a personal brand, or what is a brand? In a bigger perspective, we take. A brand is the way people know you. Very simple. So if they know me as a coach, you as a blogger, that's your brand. Your profession comes underneath your brand. Now you said yourself, if you pick up a CFO, and because I work with financial sector people a lot, executive coaching, a lot of financial sector people come to me. CFOs, you think about CFO, you're a CFO, right? There are millions of CFOs around the globe. Now, how that one CFO is different from the rest of the crowd? Because every CFO would have similar responsibilities. The scale would be different. A CFO working for Boeing would have different scale, and a CFO working for maybe a small IT company would have a different scale, but they are doing the same job, right? That doesn't differentiate them. And if that person leaves Boeing, he leaves that kind of brand. The Boeing brand is gone. So you need to build your personal brand so that people know you, not because of Boeing, because of your own skills, your credibility, your qualities, and they should start loving you. That's very simple. That's why you need to build a brand, regardless of whichever profession you are in. Otherwise, you're part of the crowd, and if you're a part of the crowd, it's very difficult to differentiate you.
Got it. Makes sense. Now, let's assume we have someone in the audience who's like in their 20s, and they agree that they should work on their personal brand. What are the advices? What is the advice that you would give them in order to build their personal brand? How should they start? How should they go about it?
To me, you start always by looking at your own self. And your personal brand should really focus on your professional skills. If it does focus on your professional skills, that's fine. But what is different between you and the rest of the crowd? I would always go back to the same point. If you draw a pyramid, so let's draw a pyramid. This pyramid, the biggest pool in this pyramid, they basically like a lot of people around us. This pyramid, the biggest pool in this pyramid is people who are seekers. So I'm again simplifying the concept. So people seeking for knowledge, information, job, advice, whatever. So they're seekers. Givers are at the tip of the pyramid. Very few people. Givers. Literally writing one little line every day for one whole year gives you 365 extra lines that other people have not written. So simple. So you should become a giver. Start giving. Learn, of course, it's part of it, and start giving. You will become different from the rest of the crowd immediately, and that's how branding starts. A personal branding, at least for me.
Got it. Now let's come back to your journey. So you said you when you changed jobs, now it was a more hardcore job, like you were more engaged and you didn't have much time to work on blogging. What happened next, and where did you move from that work?
So my corporate work continued until March 2020. But I knew around 2016 that Saip, my employer, they wanted to kind of wind up the project in Pakistan. And I was based in Pakistan. I was doing the projects in the region, but I was based in Pakistan. So technically speaking, there would not be any office in Pakistan. But they were okay to give me like regional contracts to do something. So which means that I would actually lose my full-time job, but I would still have contracts. And when you have like US-based contracts, it's quite sizable. So you can live literally a decent enough life, and still you would have travel and all that. We were Canadian immigrants since the year 2000. So we originally, me and my wife migrated in the year 2000. My wife lived here longer than I did, and we had, my first daughter was born in November 2000, and the second daughter was born in 2004. My wife couldn't keep up with two little kids, and she came back. And I was still working in Pakistan. I was making money, growing, and doing everything. So there was no need for us to come back at that point in time. But girls grew up. They were citizens, and I did a little. I'm not good in making financial decisions, but there were some decisions in my life, financial decisions that I made, like right appropriate time, at right appropriate time. So for both of them, I bought education RESPs at that point in time. So they knew. So I had those certificates, and I showed them these certificates. See, the Baba had bought you like insurance education, and so they had in mind when they were like little that they would go back to Canada for their studies, and rightly so as well. And so everything kind of started kind of falling into places. My company organization wanted to shut down. I didn't want to move anywhere else. The elder one was already in her A levels, so she was ready to go to university, and she was inspired by her chacha. My younger brother is a medical biotechnologist, so she said, I just wanted to become a medical laboratory scientist or something like that. The little one was little, so she was in 8th grade when we started thinking about it. So we moved in 2019, moved back to Canada. For me, the transition was not challenging. So moving was just packing up and landing here literally from Pearson, coming back home and have biryani because my mother cooked biryani. Whole of my family lives here. So for me, it was no sleeping on couches or whatever. We were okay. Like we were living in Ajax, at my brother's house, so it was okay. So there was a point that that completely but shifted my approach. In 2019, when I came, I was already I was employed, full-time employed by US organization, but we were closing those projects remotely. In January 2020, I was invited to come to Washington, D.C., and we kind of discussed the future prospects of me continue working with them on contractual basis because I'm a regional expert. So if you discuss with me what are the political issues in Nepal, for instance, economic issues in Sri Lanka, I knew that at that point in time. Okay, I'm disconnected for a while, but if I go back, my knowledge doesn't go anywhere, right? It is still there. I just have to kind of beef it up for the past 3 years. Anyways, so there was the thing that was going on, and they actually gave me a little contract as well, just to kind of start the process after 31st March. So until 31st March 2020. But when I came back, when I was coming back from Washington, I was just thinking, do I really want to do again a contract job and work on time zones that are like very awkward, like working in Sri Lanka or even Papua New Guinea. I was like doing Papua New Guinea project and stuff, and that's kind of an option. The other option was to like leave everything and find a job opportunity in Canada, which I knew that I would get. Or the third option was to jump into my own experiment, which is what I'm doing now. And I was almost interestingly forced into it. Remember what happened in 2020? COVID. So with COVID, the whole world went on the background, and the projects we had at site were almost kind of paused. So, and that was like a forced measure, and they said, we can't do anything about it because the partners are not working. So obviously, there was kind of a thing that triggered me. So 1st April 2020, I had already started kind of turning on my laptop and started working on my stuff as a coach, which I'm very happy that I took that decision and kind of reinvented myself. This is, I think, probably the 4th reinvention. I've done 4th reinvention in my whole working career. If I kind of map it up.
Cool, thank you. This is good. Now I would like to understand your journey from 2019 to today purely as a coach, because now you've pivoted. Now you are in a very different segment. You're a solopreneur. Where were you in 2019 where you said, this is something I can do and it's kind of something I can push and it's moving in the right direction? And how are you able to move it in the right direction? And where are you now? And Who is Hammad Siddiqui now?
So I have to kind of rewind my thinking process a little. But believe me, Barrows, when I started, I only knew that I would achieve it. I would achieve my goal. Very simple. My goal was to become one of the most famous LinkedIn coach in the world. Very simple. Simple goal. No rocket science. And when you have simple goals, you have simple process to achieve those goals as well. So my simple process was that I should become known and I should really be speaking to more people. The segment that I kind of decided to work on was immigrants. And I knew with my own experience of working in Canada, or at least traveling in Canada, is 90% newcomers fail miserably in Canada. So if I could help them in their job search journey, it could be an interesting thing to do, because they come in and they have money in their pocket. So they can pay me whatever little fee that I have. And then another USP I had, that I could speak both languages, right? Hindi, Urdu, as well as English. Third interesting USP I had, I knew cultures. So I worked in Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, a little bit, like very little in India, Afghanistan, Iran. So I knew the culture, so I could relate to people culturally as well. So all these things put together was kind of my journey, starting journey. But believe me, I did not know how to productize, so I just had a product in my mind that I'm going to coach people how they should use LinkedIn effectively. That was it. And I would provide them LinkedIn profile optimization service, because see how many LinkedIn profiles are optimized? Hardly any. We don't need to use LinkedIn back home. We never appreciate how powerful LinkedIn is. So I started that. In my first month, April, I got my first client. I was very happy. And when the client wanted to sign up for LinkedIn profile optimization, and he said, "How much will you charge?" The client was from Canada. And literally, I had no idea how much should I charge. Right? Nobody would have. When you start, you really don't really know how much time would it require to fix it. And if I leave it for a guess to all this audience that we have, I think we may have different numbers, but I'm going to tell you what. So I only charge 50 Canadian dollars for this LinkedIn profile optimization. And I was so happy. Literally, I was so happy. Now I knew that there is a need for the product, for that service or the product. I knew that somebody was willing to pay me $50. And now it was my test to deliver the product. And these are the biggest component in your productization process. The product, the price, and how you would deliver it. If you figure these three things out, you are actually creating a product or a service. So I did that. But after a whole month, I had just had one. I had queries, people were asking me, but just $150. At the end of the month, and that's very interesting. My wife asked me, and my wife is a homemaker. She said, so a little bit in Urdu and then English. Kitne paise kamaye is mahine? How much did you make in this month? And I said, $50. She said, what? When we go out for a coffee, or kids go to a shop, we spend more than this, in just one go. How are we going to survive? And she got worried. Don't worry. Remember, if one person has bought my service, there are another 50,000 who can. If one person paid me $50, there are other who would pay me $500 or even $5,000. This means that the product has some value. I just have to kind of enhance the shape it up, carve it and craft it to make it what is more sellable or more acceptable in the marketplace. So that was a starting point for me. So fast forward 3 years. So I've completed 3 years in April 2023 rather, a month ago. But I'm at a point where I'm actually being approached by relatively large organizations, I would say mega organizations, and they want to collaborate with me. And I'm at a point where I say, okay, I have to really pick an organization that I want to work with. I don't want to work with everyone out there. And all that this seems fascinating, but it's like 3 years of 60, 70 hours, maybe 80 hours, still sitting in my bedroom. I'm still doing this podcast sitting in my bedroom. And that's the beauty of this whole process.
Cool. This is again amazing journey and amazing story. Now, one important question. I think I've kind of figured out the answer, but I want to know your take on it, which is how do you determine what your goals are? Like there was a time I always wanted to do my own business, and I've tried a couple of times here and there, but it was just so open. Like you were very much narrowed down on a niche. LinkedIn, new immigrants, career coaching, very niched. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I want to get out of the 9 to 5. I want to do my own business. And then what that business could be anything. But I tried here and there. And I believe since I was never focused, I never knew what my niche is, what my strengths are. I was always all over the place and I lost a lot of money doing that as well. I made some money, I lost some money as well. But I want to know, how do you determine, because you said a very beautiful thing, which is make the goal simple. But it sounds simple, where it is one of the hardest thing to do. So how did you go about it, or what advice would you have for anyone to determine what their goal is?
So, Burrows, what I can tell people is what my experience is. My coaching and my mentoring is all based on my experience. And when I work with my client, my process is that I actually want to share what I did and what worked for me, and let's try to find out how much of this will work for you as well. So first learning. So one of my mentee, Dr. Mudassir Ahmed, he's an engineer by profession from Indian University. Then he went to UK for his PhD. An amazing young professional. He specializes in supply chain. My interaction with him started almost about 10, 12 years ago. And he wanted to build his brand. And someone kind of put me in contact, and we were having a Faluda in Karachi. And I said, what do you want to achieve? That was my question. What do you want to achieve? As you said, what is your goal? And his goal was so simple. And I actually copied him, frankly speaking. He said, I want to become famous. Period. That's it. Very simple. I want to become famous. And famous, of course, within his own category, which was supply chain. At this point in time, he's amongst top 50 supply chain influencers. He has a startup which has a valuation of over $1 million. And his YouTube channel is number 3 in the supply chain category in the world. His newsletter is the most read newsletter within supply chain industry. One goal, simple. He wanted to become famous. My goal was very simple. I wanted to become famous too. But there is a little caveat to this. See, why people struggle is, first, of course, the goals are pretty vague. They really don't know what exactly they want to achieve. They want to do something different. The other thing is they try to copy someone. So if you copy someone, that's not you. You're different, right? Every individual is different. So what I did when I started my solopreneurship or journey as a solopreneur, I said, okay, Hammad, what are your skills, right? And my skills were, I knew that allow me to say, I'm an amazing coach.
You are.
The other thing, I'm a good storyteller. I can put things together, right? I can articulate things. And I know how to influence. And I put these 3 things together to create my business. Very simple. So your skills are very important. What skills do you have? For instance, you have, Burroughs has, your primary skills are your financial sector professional. Right? So the most credibility for an advice, if I have to invest somewhere, I have to go to a financial expert. I would not go to anyone and ask, okay, where do I put my $5 million, right? I would go to a financial sector professional. That's the first point that people miss. What are they good at? If you figure that out, what are you good at? Build everything on that. And rest of it happens. The process happens.
Makes sense. So what I determined was something similar. It's a book called Unfair Advantage. And it talks about, for you to, you've read the book tonight, it talks about you need to determine what your unfair advantages are. And the best way to determine what your unfair advantage is to see if you are in a random group of friends, or let's say if you go to your son's or your kid's birthday party, and you're there, what is that makes you uniquely different? Again, the point is because people try to be better and comparative versus being different. And I continue to push that you just need to be different. So when you're standing there, what is different about you? So I realized I have worked for P&G. I am in finance. I moved to Canada as a newcomer. I'm brown. I speak, as you said, I speak Urdu, Hindi as well. So I can relate to that group of people as well. So I started to mix all of this together. And now what really started to pick up on my channel is how to get a job in P&G. Now, there are other YouTubers as well who make similar videos, but there is no brown guy who makes a video who's come from Southeast Asia, is in Canada, is in North America now, and makes a video on Procter & Gamble, how to get into Procter & Gamble. So for instance, I can relate to you more easily versus Simon Sinek. Now, Simon Sinek is a bigger brand, and there are times I watch his videos as well. But I see when you come and you talk about something, you seem approachable. And the reason you seem approachable is because I can relate to you. You're the same color, you have the same journey. And certainly when you speak, it touches my heart more. I find it more believable versus Simon Sinek or Warren Buffett or Mark Zuckerberg. They're like aliens to me. I follow them, I see their advice, but it doesn't really touch me, or I feel true. It only feels true when it comes from someone like you, or let's say if I would be saying it. And I started to realize that this is my unfair advantage. I'm not for the white guys. Maybe I am in some extent. There are at times white people as well, or other people from other countries or other regions as well who reach out. But most of my students are from Southeast Asia. So that is one. And second piece I realized on this unfair advantage, or what your strengths are, is what are people coming and asking you about. So for instance, if someone comes and asks you about, hey Hammad, I want to buy a car, can you please advise me? It means that you know something about the car more than that individual, and hence that could be one skill that you can use and expand on it. So for me, it was when I moved to Canada, there was this individual, a friend of mine, who also wanted to move to Canada, and she called me and she said, can you help me understand how to go about looking for a job in Canada? So I dropped her a voice message, and it was like a 5-minute long voice message because I went through the details of what are the options. And she replied back saying, wow, this is amazing. You kind of gave me the complete advice. I was like, if this person is coming to me for advice, I'm sure there are more people who need similar advice. And if they're coming to me, it means I have that unfair advantage. So I started to exploit that as well. So again, two things I wanted to say is, find your unfair advantage, and the way you can find it, one is how different you are in a group setting, and second, what is that one thing that people come to you, your friends, your family, your brother, just picks up the phone and says, hey Hammad, can you help me with this? It simply means you know that thing better than that other person.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's the most perhaps the most challenging part. I don't want to use the word difficult part. Challenging part in our life. What do we want to achieve? As I said, I work with senior executives. They don't really know what they want to achieve. Honestly speaking, most of them don't. So anyone with a linear career path that people usually have, professionals usually have a linear career path, they don't want to experiment. And when you don't experiment, you don't know. Very simple. So I'm working with hasn't signed up as yet, but he's going to sign up. a very senior level financial sector professional against in Saudi Arabia. Amazing guy, very extremely talented, grew fast in his career and everything. Now he wants to kind of aim at more senior level position, and I was almost about to say he's aiming at C-suite. He's already in C, but CEO kind of a thing. Now, aiming at C-suite requires, to me, not an MBA degree. He's a chartered accountant, right? So you're a chartered accountant already. You've been in the field for 20 years. You've done everything that is required. What you're missing, a couple of things, maybe three things. One is you're not showing off. It's a very sensitive word for many people, but if you don't show off, nobody would know. Yeah, in a very humble way. You have to show off. You have to tell people who you are, what you can do. Second is the leadership. Most of the financial sector people are good when they're leading their own teams, which is their finance teams. But that's it. They're pretty much confined within that, circle of financial sector professionals. And they have a small network. Three things. Small network. So which means that, maybe another CFO would know me, another finance director would know him. But how many top level board people know him? So, to become a CEO, you need to know people who are sitting at the board level. Because that's a board level position. You're as a senior executive. So you have to behave. So it's like, this is interesting thing that I want to share with you. There's something called duck test. The duck test is very simple. I'm picking it up from someone who kind of gave me the example. So if you can walk like a duck, quack like a duck, you probably are a duck. Yeah. So you have to behave like someone who has this leadership capability, but in a very subtle way. People should appreciate it. You should not say it from your own, on your own. I'm a leader. That doesn't work. So they should know. People should start appreciating you as a leader, somebody who takes initiative, somebody who kind of is very happy. Another thing that I picked up working with financial sector professionals, most of my clients are there in the financial sector. These people are boring, right? They don't smile, they don't crack jokes, and they're pretty much confined to their cubicle or their room. They're not public figure. They're not people's persons, most of them. I don't want to generalize it, but that's what I felt. But as soon as I started kind of helping them start smiling, right? Why don't you smile? And why don't you take someone out for a leisure, a cup of coffee or a pizza or something, and just don't talk about business, talk about something else, sports, whatever, fashion, arts. Come out of that silo that you have built around you. So as soon as you break that silo, you're a different person altogether. Now you become a CEO level person, because from a CEO point of view, you have to kind of see, you're sitting here, right? You have to, it's not in the C-suite that you're dealing with. It's not only the board that you're dealing with. You must deal with everyone within the organization. Very simple. I mean, I can go on for hours on these topics, but that's what my experience has been. That's what has helped me. In my previous organization, so in British Deputy High Commission, we didn't have a lunch break because we were working 7 hours. So we would just have a desk lunch. But inside, we would have a lunch break. And I made sure that everybody sits together and have lunch together. So whatever you bring in, you just bring in and we share the food. And then we started something else. We said, okay, it's fruit season. Winter is fruit season, right? So we bought a juicer. Said, let's have some fresh fruit, fresh juice, and we would just bring in beets and stuff like that, carrots, and Hoti would make a full jug full of like fresh juice, and we would have it. Literally, that is the spirit that you need to kind of put into your work if you want to become a CEO. If you don't, you may still become a CEO, but people won't love you.
Beautifully said. And I like one thing you said, which I remember my manager coaching me as well. Like in PNG, we used to have bands 1, 2, 3. So 3 would be a senior, one junior. And I think when I was band 2, I would come to him and I would talk about like, when do I become band 3? When do I get promoted? When do I get to the next level? And he said, if you want to get to the next level, start acting like it first. So you need to act like it. And he said it exactly. He said, when I wanted to get promoted, I would stand in the front of the mirror and I would say, I am a band 3 manager. I'm not a band 2 anymore. I am a band 3 going to office now. And suddenly everything changes. It's similarly, for instance, when you're writing a document in your workplace, when I would write a document, I would give it to a manager to read. Because he has the manager cap on or the teacher's cap on, he would bring it back with all the red marks on it. And I thought I did a great job. And then the red marks, I would go like, how did he figure out this is wrong or this doesn't make sense? And how was he able to figure all of that out and be so in detail? And I only realized when I became that manager and wore the teacher's cap is because my mindset changed. Now, even the best of the documents, I can scrutinize it and I can put red marks on it just because I changed my way I was thinking about things. So if I take that cap when I'm writing the document, which is I write the document and then I say, okay, now I'm the manager who will read the document as a manager, you will find the red marks yourself. You don't really need to go to the manager to really find those red marks. So it's so true. You need to behave and act like that person in your mind for you to reach that level.
Focus is everything, Bahros. If we focus, it starts appearing in front of us. And I'll tell you 2 little stories here. And one is kind of an experiment people should do. The other one is a story. So if you want a red car, so you want to change and you want a red Ferrari or whatever red car, start thinking about red car. Usually this is what we do, right? We're starting, okay, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is, with family, with your wife, your kids, you discuss it. All of a sudden, when you drive, you start seeing those cars. Exactly same car. Experiment that. It will happen because we are not focusing. It's not that the cars were not there on the road. They were there, but we never spotted those cars because we are not focusing, right? The other one is a little story. So at British Deputy High Commission, I had a junior, and I mean, wherever I worked, we tried to kind of stay together, but of course there was like different levels. There was a junior, Athar Moin Khan, who is now the trade commissioner with the Canadian Trade Office in Karachi. Fantastic fellow, and he was in conversation with back office somewhere in the UK with someone. There were like things were going on, not pleasantly though. They were arguing over email, and he would write an email and there was something going on. So he wrote an email and he said, "Hammad, would you please look at the email?" I said, "Yes." And I'm still in like an old thinking. I said, "Can you print it out for me?" So he printed the email and said, "Please also print what he sent you, because I wanted to relate." And so I read his email first, and then I read that guy's email. I don't remember exactly was a male or a female, but I read that email. And technically speaking, Athar wrote a very long email, by the way, like 3-4 paragraphs. And I said, "Athar, basically what you're saying in this email is you agree to what he said." But yes. So I said, "Why are you writing that long email? Just say I agree, period." So, it's literally in your hand to kind of maneuver around this thing. It's very simple. And nobody taught me all that. I mean, it's just like, in most of the cases, we know it. We don't practice it. And I was lucky in my life, still am very lucky, alhamdulillah, that I had the opportunity and the courage to experiment and to kind of practice it. And so I think that's two things that we need to keep in mind. Yeah, focus is very important.
So, Hammad, I have a lot of questions. I was taking notes as you were going on, and there is so much I want to deep dive more, but we are about an hour already. So, what I suggest is, and my promise to you was that we'll keep it in an hour. So, I would request you to allow me one more session with you where we can go deeper in these questions. And things that I want to especially talk about is why LinkedIn, how LinkedIn, your advice with regards to career, getting a job, getting hired in Canada, and for that matter, anywhere else as well, networking. So I want to talk about all of that as well. And in the end, I would like to understand how you're thinking of your life at age 58, which you are, because most of people I know, especially back home, they already consider themselves as old at 58, and you are young at 58. So would also like to understand what your future goals, aspirations are. But again, thank you for this time. uh, Two parting thoughts, if you can share. One is, where can people find you? I will leave those links here in the description of this video, but would be nice if you can say them. And second, any parting thoughts for the listeners of this video?
So you can either find me through my website, or you can find me on my LinkedIn, and engage me on LinkedIn on my posts. I would love to see your comments as well. Anybody who is interested in talking to me, I'll be more than happy to do so. Parting thought: I feel that if you really want to do something, you have all the capabilities to do it or to achieve your goals. 2 pointers. One is the desire. You really want to do it. That's a desire. Number 2 is faith. Faith in yourself. So if you have these two, you will make it. You will make it to the point, and you will actually find more opportunities in your way. It's like driving on a freeway or a highway. You have different things appearing. You have billboards, you have fields, you have buildings, you have got so much. It's treated as a highway. You're driving on a highway. You have an objective to reach to that point. That's the desire, and you're driving. That's the faith that you have. If you combine these two, you will achieve it.
Cool. Thank you, Hammad. This was amazing. As I said, I would need to connect again with you. It was such amazing knowing you, your journey, the amazing things you have to share. I can go for another 5 hours now, but again, time is limited. So we'll catch you for a second podcast session. Thank you.
Looking forward. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you found value from this video. And in case you did, I'm sure you will also find value from another video on my channel where I talk about how you can leverage the LinkedIn network in order for you to land your dream job. Here's the link to that video. Other than that, I'm sure you'll also find value from this video where I talk about 4 strategies that you can make use of in order to ace any interview. Check out that video here.